I feel like eating a Pop-Tart while filming a YouTube video is either peak self-care or it's peak 2020 sucks and I don't give a fuck anymore, so I'm gonna eat a Pop-Tart while filming a YouTube video. So I'm just gonna do that and eat my Pop-Tarts while I'm filming this, but I'll try not to be annoying and talk with food in my mouth the entire time. Let's see how that goes. Welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, impactful to Pop-Tarts, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And this was an album that I was pretty excited to talk about. As you can tell by the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2010 Kid Cudi album, Man on the Moon 2: The Legend of Mr. Rager. Kid Cudi is a rapper from Cleveland, Ohio, who, despite falling a little bit under the radar, has been one of the more popular rappers of the late 2000s into the 2010s. He initially had his big commercial breakthrough in 2009 with his debut album, Man on the Moon: The End of Day. That album released not long after Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreak, another record that Cudi had a big hand in, and it's an album that's been seen as something of a classic in recent years. Some have even gone as far as to call it one of the most influential hip-hop albums in recent memory, thanks largely to its moody, ethereal vibes, Cudi's ability to blend hip-hop with other genres like indie rock, and his introspection and overall ability to lay out all of his insecurities in such a raw way made him a voice worth listening to. And he has had a big influence on several artists, including Drake, Kanye West, Travis Scott, Kendrick Lamar, Childish Gambino, Logic, A$AP Rocky, Jaden Smith, and Kevin Abstract, just to name a few on the very long list. Now, I recently listened to Cudi's debut album to see what I was missing out on, and I really like that project a lot. Even after so many years, I still feel that record's influence in many modern artists, and it really sounds like it hasn't aged a day. However, I was curious going into this album. Would the sequel be able to live up to its predecessor, especially given that said predecessor was so amazing? The album is 17 tracks and just over an hour, just about on the same wavelength as the first Man on the Moon album. And much like that project, this one is divided into 5 acts. Act 1, The World I Am Ruling, features 2 tracks and it kicks off the album pretty solidly. Scott Mescudi vs. The World is the opener and it features an appearance from CeeLo Green. It carries a lot of the psychedelic vibes of Cudi's best work and it's lifted so heavily by how bouncy and catchy the beat is. Cudi himself rides the beat pretty much perfectly, welcoming us nicely into the world of this album, and CeeLo's chorus brings it home excellently. Revo Fev is a crazy different song though, as it leans more into the alternative rock sound, and the instrumental kind of feels a little bit old-timey. I do think Cudi's vocals are decent, though I'm not all that crazy about the chorus. I know it sounds similar to a number of things Cudi would do, but it's just not all that catchy here. Act 2, A Stronger Trip, is a bit longer at 4 tracks, but it does slow up a good deal in comparison to the first act. I would honestly say Act 2 is probably the weakest one on here. Don't Play This Song features the legendary Mary J. Blige, and lyrically, this is a very dark song as Cudi essentially talks about how he feels when he's not on drugs. I do like how moody and low-key the song is, though again, I'm not as in love with the chorus here, and I wish Mary J. Blige had a little bit more of a presence on the song. Still, she is utilized nicely, and I think Cudi's flows on his verse are pretty solid. Wake Your Mind Up is a short interlude lasting just under a minute and a half. It's got a somewhat dark, cool feel to it, but again, it's a short interlude that really doesn't add that much to the album for me. Marijuana is a surprising turn, as it doesn't really take a tone of loving everything about weed. It's got a very beautiful light piano instrumental, and Cudi flows as smoothly as ever on his verse. But while the instrumental is pretty varied, I do wish there was a little bit more to the song. All that's really here is the verse, hook, and a few other small vocal bits. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of structure to what's going on here. Mojo So Dope is easily the best song on the second act. The beat is bouncy and it excellently samples Claustrophobia by Choir of Young Believers. As always, Cudi flows smoothly on the song and the chorus is one of the most solid ones here. Act 3, Party On, is another 4-track segment of the album, and after a slow start, this is where the record really starts kicking into gear. Ashton Kutcher, excellent title by the way, moves away from the introspection of some of the previous tracks for something that's a bit more lighthearted and fun, almost as if Cudi himself is taking on a personality akin to that of Ashton Kutcher's iconic character Kelso from that 70s show. I love how head noddy the beat is, how well Cudi bounces off of that beat with his flow, and the chorus is one of my personal favorites on the album. It's a carefree kind of song, but one that has plenty of fun put into it. Erase Me has an appearance from Kanye West, and it's another different sounding song compared to what else is here, leaning more into the alternative rock sound and leaning a bit more on Cudi's vocals and his singing as opposed to his rap flows. While I love the vibe of the instrumental, I am not quite as interested in a lot of Cudi's vocals here. The chorus is good and his jumps into falsetto are charming, but I think vocally he kind of struggles on the verses. verses. And Kanye's verse is fine, though it does end with a really cringy diarrhea pun that is completely groan-worthy. I see why this song became a popular single, but it's just not for me. Wildin' 'Cause I'm Young slows the tempo a little bit, but it's still a bumping track with a somewhat rumbling beat. As per usual, Cudi slides on this beat, and the song has this feel of being a bit expensive. While listening, I kind of got this vibe that it sounds like it's echoing throughout an empty arena. I love the feel of it though, and I think it's an immediate great highlight on the album. The Mood is the last of the more party-heavy songs on the album, and it's got this really brooding, creepy production that feels like it combines video game sounds with these creepy, evil laughs, almost as if the song is kind of foreshadowing the darker sections that are going to come later on the album. It's pretty compelling though, and even though the song is short and doesn't have the biggest chorus, it leaves such an impact in its short runtime. Act 4, The Transformation, is one more 4-track portion of the album, and it continues the strong pace that Act 3 put this thing on. Maniac features appearances from Cage and St. Vincent, though St. Vincent's feature is more in the sample, as this track flips her song The Stranger. It does have a suitably foreboding instrumental though that really works well for it, and the vocal interplay between Cudi and Cage is solid here too. It's a very twisty cut that again feels a little short but makes up for that in terms of sheer memorability. Mr. Rager is more of a ballad where Cudi takes on the role of his impulsive persona, Mr. Rager. Obviously it slows things down a little bit, but the drums here are still very compelling, and even if Cudi's vocals are a bit slurred throughout the song, I think his singing is among some of the best that I've heard on this album. And These Worries has another appearance from Mary J. Blige, though this time she has more of a presence on the song as she sings the full chorus with Cudi and even handles the bridge. The song is more spacey and ethereal than a lot of what else is here, but it succeeds in how twisty and weird it is. Cudi slows down his flow, but it works well for the punchy feel of the song, and Mary J. Blige sounds great here too. And then there's The End, which features GLC, Chip the Rapper, and Nicole Ray. It's another more spacey jam with instrumentals that sound almost extraterrestrial to me. I'm not as crazy about Nicole Ray's chorus, but GLC's verse has a chill vibe. Chip the Rapper has a few clever cadences on his verse, and Cudi's somewhat start-stop flow is very catchy, and it is easily the best part of the track. That track is not actually the end though, as Act 5, You Live and You Learn, features 3 more tracks. Surprisingly, it's also the only act on the album that doesn't have any feature appearances. And a few of the cuts on this act are great highs on the album. All Along is a more sad song as Cudi comes to grips with the fact that he feels like he'll always be alone. This is honestly a really relatable song for me, and I think that the mellow feel of it is pretty beautiful. Cudi's vocals are also pretty understated, but that's for the better as they add to the overall beauty of the track and make it one of the best cuts here. Ghost is a much louder song, but despite having something of a celebratory vibe to it, it's actually a much darker track focusing on depression. Despite how loud it is though, I think that works for the song, and it still manages to have plenty of raw emotion that makes it really compelling. Cudi sounds great once again, and it's another dark, introspective track that I really enjoy. Trapped in My Mind closes the project out, and it's another more raw, introspective track that's built on a few more creepy sounds. Cudi's vocals sound decent even though they are a bit more filtered and processed. I'm not as crazy about the chorus, but I do like how varied the instrumental is and how raw Cudi's writing is. I don't think it was the best choice as an album closer, but it is a pretty decent cut on its own. Overall, Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon sequel doesn't quite live up to the first one, but it was always going to be hard to do that given how influential that first project was. And Man on the Moon 2 does have a few inconsistent moments. It gets off to a bit of a slow start, and some of the choruses on it are not all that compelling. But even so, I'd be lying if I said this was a bad album, because this is a very good sequel. With this record, Cudi continued to show that he had a very distinct, different voice in hip-hop, and much like his debut, his sound was a refreshing reprieve from a lot of the brash, macho braggadocio of hip-hop. And while his singing could be a bit inconsistent, his flows were consistently catchy, and there were several tracks here where he definitely showed that he was capable of providing some genuine beauty with his vocals. His writing was also very raw and introspective for the better. His production choices were consistently interesting, and his genre bending continued to be on full display here. Does the album scale the heights or have the impact and importance of Cudi's first album? Probably not, but in spite of some inconsistent stretches, this is definitely a strong follow-up project for the Man on the Moon. Back in 2010, I don't know how I would have felt about this thing because I wasn't all that familiar with Cudi's music. Listening to it now though, I do think it's enjoyable even if it doesn't quite reach the heights of the first Man on the Moon record. If I had to put it on my scale, it would definitely get a good rating from me. Not Cudi's best, but all in all, a very solid, ambitious, and well-executed body of work. But that's that's just my opinion on this record. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in 2010? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it then, hate it then, love it now, hate it now? Are you indifferent towards Kid Cudi? What are your experiences with his music? And which of the Man on the Moon projects do you prefer? Are you like me and do you prefer the first one, or do you think the second one is better? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them down in the comments section. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I won't beg you for it. In terms of what's next, I've mentioned this before, but we have a really busy November for 10 Years Later videos. And the next album that I'm going to be talking about is CeeLo Green's The Lady Killer. I have heard plenty of good things about that record, so I am interested in checking it out myself. So stay tuned for that, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.